Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our entitled people. In today's episode, my aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck and her life fell apart. Entitled millionaire client. Fix it and pay for it. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck and her life fell apart. Sorry if anything is misspelled, I have horrific dyslexia. My aunt was one of two kids my grandparents had. My mother was the polar opposite to my aunt. She worked from the age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job till the age of 26, was constantly stealing from her parents and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. Didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did, my grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mom and her kids, unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mom would visit her was because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004, and a few months after, my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold and the money split 25% each to my mom and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. In 2010, my mom died after an accident and did not have a current will in place. As she no longer had her business and was renting a house, she didn't have anything of much monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she have passed away, but had told me everything she wanted. The music, the flowers, the coffin color, and even what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colors. So when she passed, my aunt and nan took over all the arrangements and tried to undo all the things I told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew mom didn't like, the flowers were all the wrong colors, and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few of the things back to what they were supposed to be, but the coffin couldn't be changed for some reason, and my nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by our aunt that she didn't have any involvement with the writing of the will, and our nan told us that she changed it so that mom's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After mom passed away, my nan just stopped talking about my mom. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter, but even 5 years after mom passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about mom, nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her shitty kids had it. And if you went to talk to her about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I had suffered a mental breakdown after my mom's death, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear, well, X has had it so much worse. In 2016, my nan passed away. She had written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral, and it was basically all the same things she had picked out for my mom's funeral, even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral using my mom as the stand-in, but it was obvious that's what she was trying to do. So after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading, and my aunt kept telling me, oh, it'll be another month before we can do the reading. I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start uni, so it would be a hell of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will, and asked what was happening. The solicitor let slip that the will had already been read, and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will, and it confirmed what we already knew. The house and all its contents were now my aunt's. This included my granddad's war medals he fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he had promised them to me before he died, she said, "Well, unless you have it in writing, you will have nothing in this house." Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. My heart sank. Clive, not his real name Obbs, was her eldest son, and the dictionary definition of a mess up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing drugs. I knew that the moment that Prick had got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000. She had pissed off too many people in our town, so she was gonna sell the house and move closer to her daughter, who lives in a big city. An offer was made on the house, and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city. And I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues. And oh boy, were there. Turns out that the land the house was built on way too soft for the type of house it was, and it was sinking. It has sunk about 2 cm in the 40+ years my nan and granddad had lived there, but the sinking was accelerating to 1 cm per year. This meant that within the next 3 years the house would need some serious work, or be knocked down. The new value of the house? £60,000. The buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy her new house, but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he had trashed every single one he'd ever been given. Someone reported this, and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with her shithead son and her partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she would try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time as I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to die for having a retard like you." In the middle of a busy street. Someone reported her to the police, and she had an official warning from them, and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000, and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends, and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home, let's call her Sue, but they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house while my aunt looked for a job and a home to rent. Even with £85,000, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her account. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, Sue and my aunt get into a screaming match and my aunt said something along the lines of, "I should have aborted you." Sue immediately kicked her out of her house. So, again, there's my aunt, in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last bridge she had a smoldering wreck. Last anyone has heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get joy out of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. Enjoying the warmth doesn't mean you started the fire. I want this printed on a shirt TBH. It's been always burning since the world's been turning. Not one to take pleasure in others' plight, but sometimes karma is good to see. Boy howdy, ain't that the truth. I'm so upset about those war medals. I feel the same about my own grandpa's medals. I'm so sorry. This doesn't make up for that. It's nice to know that people sometimes don't get away with things like this, especially because I'm currently involved in a situation with someone like your aunt. Thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom and grandpa. Thank you for your kind words. Although I'm still upset about the loss of the medals, I even tried to find who he sold them to, but he wouldn't tell me, the prick. I'm happy that I still have the stories he told me of time in the war. And I'm glad I get to share them with his great-grandchildren. I think it was well deserved. Good on Sue for standing up for herself, kicking out her mother for saying something so awful. Glad to see karma at its best and most deserved. I'm disabled and we bought a RV travel trailer to travel for business and pleasure across the US before buying a house in a new state, part of the Great California Migration, for a bit less than a year. I can tell you from experience that your aunt is not enjoying her caravan lifestyle. Especially if it's in cold, damp England and suffering so badly from arthritis. The humidity just about killed me because there's not much insulation and I was badly crippled whenever it rained, summer or winter. So I can almost guarantee that your awful aunt is likely even more miserable than you thought. Karma in spades. My uncle tried the same, but my late grandmother didn't change the will in his favor as she told him she had. He was living with her but didn't go into the lawyer's office when he was pressuring her. She made her will that everything split 50-50ths between my dad and him. He was executor and tried to cheat dad when the house was sold, but here you have to submit final accounting to probate and they question much of what he did. Needless to say, dad got half the house and half her remaining assets. Entitled millionaire client. I'm a decorator and began working with a couple bad apples over a year ago when I was still getting established independently. This one client has been obsessed with getting the best deal and bargain on every single item we have purchased. This is a $3 million home, and she will squabble over even a $10 price difference. She has zero respect for my livelihood. During design presentations, she whips out her laptop to search for cheaper versions of my selections. She owns a business that has nothing to do with design and used her tax ID to fraudulently open wholesale accounts with my vendors, which are only for members of the trade. So disrespectful. I have devoted years to curating my list of vendors and learning how to procure beautiful pieces. Only for someone so entitled to around me to buy wholesale instead of purchasing the product through me, and violating my policy. This woman has an eagle eye for defects that she uses to try to get credits and refunds. She ordered her own shades and got the wrong size, then spent hours on the phone until customer service agreed to give her another credit. She manipulated my plumber and carpenter into lowering their rates, using this tone and acting as if she is of a separate class than them. This woman thinks she is entitled to decide how much she thinks someone is worth and how much she feels like paying after the work is done. After over a year, we haven't completed much. I have redesigned some rooms 3 times and helped on rooms that weren't even on the scope because I just wanted something to get done so I can collect my check and run for the hills. Finally, I said I cannot continue the project without charging her a new fee. We have gone way over the time I charged for and there's no end in sight. She hasn't focused, she has gotten caught up in minute details and literal dollars and cents at every turn. She derails meetings by changing focus from room to room. I sent her a bill for the balance owed and deducted the last credit she wanted. This was unacceptable to her. I should waive this fee and send her a check for the credit. What about the hours upon hours of wasted time where she asked for redesigns again and again? She pointed out this is a word-of-mouth business and she already has an incredible new designer who doesn't mind her stealing their vendors and has cheaper prices, I guess. I told her to go ahead and see how things go if she behaves the same way with this new decorator. I called the vendor for her dining room wallpaper and she has opened an account with them. My vendor revoked her access and she will not be able to order the wallpaper unless she pays retail. Too bad, because my price was below retail. Classic entitled person mess up. It's a small victory, but it helps ease the pangs of disgust and violation. You need to call all your vendors and tell them she is not entitled to discounts. You should have your own unwritten rule about how much BS you're going to accept from any client, and when that limit is reached, I don't think I'm a good fit for what you're looking for. I think you'd be better off with designer you have a beef with, as I think they'd be better able to assist you. Then blacklist them. Your sanity is worth more than your time. You should feel appreciated. My mother was an interior designer. She could make a garden shed look like a palace. If this is a word-of-mouth business, then I bet people will know what weight to give her blabber. Fix it and pay for it. Couldn't think of a better place to put this, so I figured here will have to work. My brother-in-law has to be one of the most entitled people I have ever met. So, my husband gets a text message the other day that his brother had purchased a bunch of new equipment. He told my husband that he still had his old equipment, and if he wanted to, if my husband could get it working, he would sell it to him. Yes, so he wanted my husband to drive an hour to him, fix his broken shit, and then purchase it after it was repaired. The lion, the witch, and the audacity of her. Husband should show up and break brother's new tools while pretending to fix the broken ones. If you think you can get it working, I'll sell it to you is not uncommon. Well, depending on if it can be fixed and you want it, offer to buy it unfixed at a reasonable cost. I wouldn't fix it and then try to buy it. He's going to try to sell it to you for a premium after you fixed it. If you determine that it can be fixed, give him a price for your labor first. If he doesn't want to pay you for fixing it, just nope. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.